My hands were shaking so violently I could barely hold the phone. "Mom, where are you?" Sarah's voice cut through the cheerful party music like a knife through silk. "I'm at Elena's birthday party, sweetheart. Your aunt's 50th. The silence that followed lasted maybe 3 seconds but felt like 3 hours. Then she screamed, and I mean screamed, into the phone. "Get out of there right now! Take Tommy and get out! Don't talk to anyone, don't say goodbye, just go!" I didn't understand. The party was in full swing around me. Elena was laughing with her guests. My 7-year-old grandson Tommy was playing with the other children by the pool. But something in my daughter's voice, that raw terror I'd never heard before in her 32 years of life, made me move without thinking. I grabbed Tommy mid-sentence while he was showing another boy his Superman shirt, ignored his protests, and ran. People stared. Elena called after me. Michael reached for my arm. I didn't stop. The car door hadn't even fully closed when I saw it. There in my back seat, slumped against the leather like a broken doll, was Patricia Morrison, Elena's best friend, who'd supposedly gone to Florida last week to visit her dying sister. Her chest was rising and falling in shallow, labored breaths, and there was a note safety pinned to her blouse. My heart stopped, I mean that literally. I felt it skip several beats as I read those 4 words that changed everything. She knows too much. Tommy was asking me what was wrong, why Miss Patricia was sleeping in our car. But all I could hear was Sarah's voice on the phone, still connected, still screaming for me to drive. Just drive. Don't stop for anything or anyone. And in that moment, sitting in Elena's driveway with an unconscious woman in my back seat and my grandson asking questions I couldn't answer, I realized that everything I thought I knew about my family was a lie. What you're about to hear is how one birthday party exposed 15 years of deception that destroyed 12 lives and sent 3 people to federal prison. But before we go any deeper into what happened that October afternoon, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. 6 hours before I found Patricia Morrison unconscious in my car, I was standing in my kitchen making chocolate chip pancakes for Tommy. It was supposed to be a perfect Saturday, October 14th, the kind of crisp fall morning that made you grateful to live in Connecticut. Tommy was staying with me for the weekend while his parents attended a medical conference in Boston, and he was practically vibrating with excitement about Elena's party. "Grandma," Aunt Elena said there would be a magician. A real one. He'd already put on his favorite Superman shirt without being asked, his hair still sticking up from sleep. My phone buzzed on the counter. A text from Elena. "Can't wait to see you both. I have the most wonderful surprise planned." Followed by 3 heart emojis and a champagne bottle. I remember staring at that message longer than necessary, something cold settling in my stomach that I couldn't quite name. The thing about intuition is that it whispers when it should scream. As I helped Tommy with his pancakes, checked that we had Elena's gift properly wrapped, chose my blue dress that she'd complimented at Christmas, that whisper kept getting louder. Maybe it was because Sarah had called me 3 times that week, always at odd hours, always asking seemingly casual questions about Elena and Michael. Maybe it was because the last time I'd seen my brother, he'd lost weight and kept checking his phone like he was waiting for bad news. Or maybe it was just that after 63 years on this earth, you learn to recognize when something in your perfectly ordered world is about to shatter. But I pushed those feelings down, told myself I was being paranoid. Elena had been family for 15 years. She'd held my hand when my husband died, helped plan Sarah's college graduation party, sent Tommy presents for every birthday. Whatever was bothering me was probably nothing more than pre-party jitters. How wrong could one grandmother be? To understand what happened that day, you need to know about Elena. My brother Michael met her 15 years ago at a charity auction for the Children's Hospital. She was 35, elegant, already wealthy from family money that traced back to railroad fortunes nobody talked about in polite company. Michael was 42, divorced, building his commercial real estate business from nothing. Everyone said she was out of his league, but 6 months later, they were married in a ceremony that cost more than my house. And Elena, she became the center of everything. The elaborate dinner parties where state senators mingled with hospital board members. The charity galas that raised hundreds of thousands for causes nobody could quite remember afterward. The holiday gatherings where she'd gift everyone with things they'd casually mentioned wanting months before, like she kept a mental file on every person who entered her orbit. She became the family matriarch without anyone noticing the transition. If you needed advice, you called Elena. If you needed connections, Elena knew someone. When my husband died 7 years ago, Elena organized the entire funeral, handled the insurance paperwork, made sure Sarah and I didn't have to think about anything except our grief. I remember being so grateful, so relieved to have someone competent taking charge when I couldn't. Looking back now, I wonder what information she gathered during those vulnerable weeks, what access she gained to my life while I was too broken to notice. But at the time, she was just my perfect sister-in-law who swooped in like an angel when we needed her most. Then, 3 months ago, Sarah announced she was moving to Seattle. My daughter, who'd lived within 20 minutes of me her entire adult life, suddenly had a job opportunity she couldn't pass up at some tech startup I'd never heard of. She had 2 weeks to relocate. It happened so fast I didn't have time to process it, let alone question it properly. But the day before she left, we met for lunch at Antonio's, that Italian place on Main Street where we'd celebrated every milestone since she was 16. She barely touched her food, kept glancing at her phone like she expected someone to walk through the door. When I mentioned that Elena wanted to throw her a going-away party, Sarah's fork clattered against her plate. No, absolutely not. Mom, promise me you won't let her do that. The intensity in her voice startled me. Sarah, what's going on? Did something happen between you and Elena? She stared at me for a long moment, and I watched her wrestle with words she couldn't quite say. Finally, she reached across the table and gripped my hand so tightly it hurt. Mom, just be careful around Elena, okay? Just watch yourself. Don't trust everything she tells you. I laughed, actually laughed, because the idea of Elena being someone to fear seemed absurd. Honey, Elena's been nothing but good to this family. Where is this coming from? But Sarah just shook her head, paid the bill, and 2 days later, she was gone. We talked on the phone every week after that. But whenever I mentioned family gatherings or Elena's name, Sarah would find a reason to change the subject or suddenly have another call coming through. And Michael, my baby brother who I'd protected from bullies in elementary school and walked home from football practice when he couldn't get rides, had become someone I barely recognized. The weight loss started about 8 months ago. The distracted conversations where he'd forget things we'd discussed days before. The way he'd stopped showing up to our monthly dinners, always with excuses about work trips or client emergencies. When he did come around, he was checking his phone constantly, and I noticed his hands trembled slightly when Elena called. I'd asked him point blank if everything was okay in his marriage, and he'd given me that same flat smile Tommy used when he was lying about finishing his homework. Everything's perfect, Maggie. Why does everyone keep asking me that? But I'd seen the tan line where his wedding ring should have been, noticed he'd started drinking before noon on weekends, caught the way he'd flinch when Elena touched him in public. When we pulled up to Elena and Michael's house in Riverside Heights, Tommy pressed his face against the window and whispered, "Wow." The colonial mansion sat on 3 acres of manicured lawn, white columns gleaming in the afternoon sun. Cars lined the circular driveway, spilling onto the street. Porsches, Mercedes, Teslas. I drove a 7-year-old Honda. The contrast wasn't lost on me, but I'd made peace with it years ago. Michael had married up, and Elena had never made me feel less than, at least not overtly. But pulling up that day, counting at least 50 vehicles when she'd promised an intimate gathering, something felt wrong. This wasn't the small family party she'd described when she'd invited me 3 weeks earlier. Elena appeared at the front door before we'd even made it up the brick pathway, looking like she'd stepped out of a magazine in her cream-colored dress. "Margaret, Tommy, you're finally here." She pulled me into a hug that lasted just slightly too long, her French perfume overwhelming. Tommy took off running toward the backyard, where children's laughter echoed. And Elena didn't stop him. "He'll be fine. There's a magician and face painting. Now come inside, I have so many people who want to meet you." The way she said it made me feel like an exhibit she was about to show off. Inside, the house had been transformed. White roses and peonies everywhere. Professional caterers in black and white uniforms. A jazz quartet playing in the corner of the living room. This hadn't just cost money. This had cost serious money. Then came the first real warning sign, the one I should have listened to. Elena guided me to the entryway, where an ornate silver basket sat on the console table. "Margaret, be a dear and put your phone in here. We're doing something special today, a real human connection experiment. No phones, no distractions, just us." She said it with that warm smile that had charmed everyone for 15 years, but her eyes were hard. I hesitated. What if Tommy's parents called from Boston? What if there was an emergency? "Everyone else has already done it," she added, gesturing to the basket filled with phones. "Just for a few hours. When's the last time any of us went unplugged?" Michael appeared behind her, nodding. "She's right, Maggie. It'll be good for us." So I placed my phone in that basket, watched Elena cover it with a decorative silk cloth, and tried to ignore every instinct screaming at me to grab it back and leave. Without my phone, I felt untethered as I moved through the crowd of guests. Elena introduced me to people I'd never met, though she acted like I should know them all. Judge Harrison and his wife, Dr. Blackwood from the private hospital, Rebecca Sterling, whose family owned half the shopping centers in 3 counties. But as I shook hands and made small talk, I kept noticing absences. Patricia Morrison wasn't there. Elena's best friend, the woman she played tennis with every Tuesday and got manicures with every Friday, was missing from her 50th birthday party. Neither was Jennifer Huang from the library board, a woman who'd co-chaired every charity event with Elena for the past decade. And Catherine Walsh, who lived 3 doors down and had been Elena's confidant since they'd met at some garden club meeting years ago, she wasn't there either. I found Nancy Chen, another tennis regular, standing by the elaborate dessert table. "Nancy, have you seen Patricia?" I wanted to say hello. Nancy's face did something complicated, a mixture of confusion and concern. "You didn't hear? Patricia's in Florida. Her sister's dying of cancer. She had to leave suddenly last week." But that didn't make sense. I'd seen Patricia's Christmas card just last year, the one where she'd written about being an only child, about how lonely the holidays were without siblings. Before I could mention this, Dorothy Andrews, Elena's neighbor, leaned in close. Her voice dropped to barely a whisper. "Did you hear about Patricia? The police were at her house Thursday morning. Her daughter filed a missing persons report." My blood went cold. "Missing?" Nancy just said she went to Florida. Dorothy shook her head, glancing around like she was afraid of being overheard. "That's what Elena's been telling everyone, but Patricia's car is still in her driveway, her mail's piling up." Her daughter Hannah flew in from Chicago because Patricia missed their daily phone call 3 days in a row. Hannah said her mother would never just disappear without telling her, especially not to visit a sister who doesn't exist. I was about to ask more when Elena's hand clamped down on my shoulder. I actually jumped. "Margaret, there you are. I need you to meet someone very important." Her smile was bright, but her fingers dug into my shoulder hard enough to leave marks. She steered me away from Dorothy with the efficiency of a bouncer, removing an unwanted patron. As Elena pulled me toward a group of her society friends, I glanced back at Dorothy. The older woman's face had gone pale, and she was staring at Elena's back with something that looked like fear. "Elena," I tried to slow down. "Dorothy was just telling me about Patricia. Is she really okay?" Elena's laugh came out too loud, too sharp. "Oh, you know how neighbors gossip. Patricia's fine, just dealing with a family emergency. She'll be devastated she missed today." But Elena's hand was still gripping my arm, and I could feel it trembling. "Now, I want you to meet the Hendersons. They just moved into the Whitmore estate, and I've been telling them all about your teaching career." She deposited me in front of a couple I'd never met and disappeared before I could ask any more questions about her missing best friend. A chime rang through the house, crystal against crystal, and conversations died mid-sentence. Elena stood at the base of the grand staircase, Michael beside her looking like a man facing execution. "Everyone, if I could have your attention," Michael called out, his voice steady but his face drained of color. He raised his champagne glass, and I noticed his hand shaking slightly. 15 years ago, I met a woman who changed everything. Elena brought order to my chaos, light to my darkness. The words sounded rehearsed, like he'd practiced them until they lost all meaning. She knows exactly what everyone needs, often before they know it themselves. She's the glue that holds us all together, the keeper of our secrets, the guardian of our trust. That phrase hung in the air, keeper of our secrets, and I watched several guests shift uncomfortably. Judge Harrison's wife was gripping her husband's arm so tightly her knuckles had gone white. Dr. Blackwood drained his champagne in one gulp and immediately reached for another glass from a passing waiter. Rebecca Sterling was staring at the floor like she wished it would open up and swallow her. Michael continued. To Elena, who sees everything, knows everything, and somehow still chooses to love us all. Happy 50th birthday! The applause that followed was scattered and half-hearted, dying out quickly. I'd been to dozens of parties in this house over the years, and I'd never heard a toast met with such obvious discomfort. Something was very wrong, and every person in that room seemed to know it except me. Elena took Michael's place on the stairs, her cream dress catching the light from the chandelier above. She was smiling, but it didn't reach her eyes. Thank you all for being here today. You know, turning 50 is quite the milestone. It's the age where you realize you've accumulated not just years, but knowledge, perspective, information. She paused, letting that last word settle over the crowd like a fog. This room contains my dearest friends, my chosen family. And families share everything, don't they? The good times, the struggles, the secrets we'd rather keep buried. Someone in the back of the room coughed, and it sounded like a gunshot in the sudden silence. Even the jazz quartet had stopped playing. Elena's eyes swept across the crowd, landing on faces one by one. When her gaze found Judge Harrison, he actually took a step backward. When she looked at Dr. Blackwood, he went pale. I know so much about each of you, she continued, her voice soft but carrying clearly through the room. Your dreams, your fears, your little indiscretions, that's what real intimacy is, isn't it? Knowing everything about someone and choosing to protect them. She smiled wider. As long as they protect you too. The air felt thick, like trying to breathe underwater. I know where all the bodies are buried, as they say. A glass shattered somewhere in the kitchen, and several people jumped. Elena laughed. That tinkling sound I'd always found charming, but now sounded like breaking glass. I'm joking, of course. Mostly. She raised her glass. To loyalty, to family, to the unbreakable bonds we forge when we share our deepest truths with each other, to keeping promises and honoring agreements, to knowing that what happens in this circle stays in this circle, forever. The toast that followed was the quietest I'd ever heard. Glasses clinked reluctantly. Champagne was sipped rather than drunk, and the nervous laughter that rippled through the crowd sounded more like fear than amusement. Elena stood on those stairs, surveying her guests like a queen looking over her subjects, and I realized with absolute clarity that everyone in that room was terrified of her. Whatever hold she had over these people, it wasn't love or friendship. It was something else entirely. After Elena's toast, I needed air, space, something to clear my head from whatever performance I'd just witnessed. I excused myself to find the bathroom, heading toward the hallway I thought led to the powder room Elena always directed guests to. But this house was massive, and I'd had 2 glasses of champagne on an empty stomach. I took a wrong turn somewhere near the kitchen, ended up in a corridor I'd never seen before, despite 15 years of family gatherings. The sounds of the party faded behind me, replaced by the thick silence of expensive carpet and closed doors. That's when I noticed one door at the end of the hall was open just a crack, light spilling out into the dimness. I should have turned around, should have found my way back to the party, located Tommy, maybe even insisted on leaving early with some excuse about him not feeling well. But something pulled me forward, that same whisper of intuition that had been trying to warn me all day. I pushed the door open wider, Elena's home office, the one she never let anyone enter, not even Michael, according to things he'd mentioned over the years. And covering the entire wall across from her mahogany desk was something that made my stomach drop. Photographs. Dozens of them. Every single person at the party today had their picture on that wall. Professional shots, candid photos, some that looked like they'd been taken without the subject knowing. Each photo had a small index card pinned beneath it with notes written in Elena's precise handwriting. I stepped closer, my heart hammering against my ribs. Judge Harrison's photo had a note. Offshore accounts, Cayman Islands, $2, 3M unreported. Dr. Blackwood, Medicare fraud, fake billing codes, ongoing since 2019. Rebecca Sterling, Affair with husband's business partner, photographs secured. Every single person had something written below their smiling face, secrets that could destroy careers, marriages, lives. And then I saw them. 3 photos with bright red X marks slashed through the faces. Patricia Morrison, Jennifer Huang, Catherine Walsh. The 3 missing friends. Patricia's note read, "Discovered the insurance scheme, became liability." My hands started shaking so badly I had to grip the edge of Elena's desk to stay upright. That's when I saw the file cabinet against the wall. 4 drawers with labels in Elena's handwriting. The top drawer, insurance policies. I knew I should leave, knew I was crossing a line that couldn't be uncrossed, but I couldn't stop myself. I pulled the drawer open. Inside were dozens of file folders, each labeled with a name. I found Patricia Morrison's file and pulled it out with trembling fingers. Inside was a life insurance policy for $2 million, dated 8 months ago. The beneficiary was Elena. Patricia's signature was at the bottom, but something about it looked wrong. The letters too perfect, too uniform. I grabbed another file. Jennifer Huang. Same thing. $3 million policy. Elena as beneficiary. Signature that looked traced. Catherine Walsh, $5 million. Same pattern. But it was the file in the very back that made my blood freeze. My name. Margaret Chen. A life insurance policy application, not yet filed, for $1 million. My signature already forged at the bottom. And clipped to it, a photo of Tommy and me from last Christmas, his face circled in red ink. Written across the top in Elena's handwriting. Grandson provides perfect leverage. Accident scenario, carbon monoxide, winter timing optimal. I dropped the file like it had burned me, papers scattering across Elena's Persian rug. That's when I heard footsteps in the hallway, the distinctive click of Elena's heels on hardwood, getting closer. I shoved the files back into the cabinet, pushed the drawer closed, and looked frantically for another way out of the office. There wasn't one. The footsteps stopped right outside the door. The footsteps paused, then continued past the office door. I heard Elena's voice responding to someone asking about more champagne, her tone light and pleasant, the perfect hostess. I waited until the sound faded completely before slipping out of that office and practically running back toward the main part of the house. My mind was racing. Those files, those photos, the red X marks through the faces of 3 missing women, and my name, my grandson's face circled in red. This wasn't paranoia or misunderstanding. Elena had been planning something, and we were targets. I needed my phone. I needed to call Sarah, call the police, call someone who could make sense of what I'd just discovered. The silver basket sat on the entry table where Elena had placed it hours ago, still covered with that silk cloth. I glanced around, saw that most guests had moved to the backyard where dessert was being served. I lifted the cloth and started digging through the phones, trying to find mine among dozens of identical black rectangles. Finally, my fingers closed around my case with its distinctive purple cover. I pulled it out and my screen lit up with notifications. 17 missed calls, all from Sarah. Text messages filling the screen. Mom, pick up. Call me now. Are you still at Elena's? Mom, please. If you're reading this, get out of that house immediately. The last one was just 3 words, sent 5 minutes ago. She kills people. My hands shook so badly I nearly dropped the phone as I stepped out the front door onto the brick pathway. The jazz music and party conversation covered the sound of my fingers hitting Sarah's number. She answered before the first ring finished. Mom? Mom? Where are you? Her voice was ragged, like she'd been crying. I'm at Elena's party. Sarah, what's going on? What do you mean she kills people? There was a pause. Then Sarah's voice came back stronger, urgent. I hired a private investigator 3 months ago. That's the real reason I moved to Seattle, Mom. Elena found out I was looking into her background. She threatened me, said if I didn't leave Connecticut and keep my mouth shut, she'd make sure Tommy had an accident. She described exactly how she'd do it. The world tilted. I grabbed the porch railing to keep from falling. What did you find? Sarah, what is she? My daughter took a shaky breath. Elena's real name is Jennifer Caldwell. She's been married 4 times. 3 of her previous husbands died in accidents within 2 years of marriage. Every single one had life insurance policies worth millions with her as beneficiary. The investigators could never prove murder, but the pattern was clear. She moves to a new state, changes her name slightly, marries someone wealthy, and within 2 years, they're dead. I thought about Michael, the weight loss, the trembling hands, the way he'd stopped wearing his wedding ring. Mom, are you listening? The PI found something else. 3 women have disappeared in the past 8 months, all friends of Elena's. Patricia Morrison last week, Jennifer Huang in August, Catherine Walsh in June. I looked back through the window at the party still going on inside, at Elena moving through the crowd like she owned not just the house, but every person in it. The investigator thinks she's expanded her operation. She's not just killing husbands anymore. She's taking out insurance policies on wealthy friends, then making them disappear. She has a partner, someone who helps her forge documents and stage accidents. We think it's someone in law enforcement or the medical field, someone who can manipulate death certificates and police reports. My mind flashed to Dr. Blackwood, to the note under his photo about Medicare fraud. Was he the one helping her? Sarah, I found her office. There's a file with my name, a forged insurance policy, and notes about staging an accident. There's a photo of Tommy with his face circled. Sarah made a sound like she'd been punched. Get him and get out right now. Don't say goodbye, don't make excuses, just leave. I've already called the Connecticut State Police. They're sending detectives to the house, but they're 20 minutes away. Mom, you need to leave now. I started to move toward the backyard, where Tommy was playing, when Sarah said something that stopped me cold. Mom, one more thing. The PI found Patricia Morrison's daughter's phone records. The last call Patricia made before she disappeared was to the police. She'd figured out what Elena was doing and was going to report her. That was Tuesday. Nobody's seen her since. If Elena thinks you know something, if she even suspects. Sarah didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. I was already running toward the backyard, toward my grandson, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might break through my chest. I burst through the French doors into the backyard, scanning the lawn for Tommy's Superman shirt among the crowd of children watching the magician pull ribbons from his sleeve. Sarah was still on the phone, her breathing rapid in my ear. Mom, did you get him? Are you leaving? But before I could answer, Tommy appeared at my elbow, tugging on my dress with sticky fingers. Grandma, I need to show you something weird I found. His face was scrunched up in that confused expression he got when he encountered something his 7-year-old brain couldn't quite process. Tommy, not now. We need to go. I grabbed his hand, started pulling him toward the side gate that led to the driveway. But he planted his feet, surprisingly strong for such a small boy. No, Grandma, you need to see this. It's important. It's about those ladies Aunt Elena was talking about. Something in his tone made me stop. Sarah was yelling through the phone, Mom, what's happening? Why aren't you moving? I knelt down to Tommy's level, trying to keep my voice steady, even though my heart was hammering. What lady, sweetheart? What did you find? He grabbed my hand and pulled me back toward the house. I had to use the bathroom, but the one downstairs had people in it, so I went upstairs to the one Aunt Elena showed me last time. And I opened the medicine cabinet because I needed Band-Aids. Remember how you said to always check for Band-Aids in bathrooms? And there were so many pill bottles, Grandma. Like 100 of them. And they all had ladies' names on them. Different ladies, but Aunt Elena's name wasn't on any of them. He led me through the house, up the curved staircase I'd climbed dozens of times for family dinners and holiday parties, to the guest bathroom at the end of the second-floor hallway. My legs felt like they might give out with each step. Sarah was still on the phone, and I could hear her talking to someone else now, giving them the address, saying something about officers en route. Tommy pushed open the bathroom door and pointed at the medicine cabinet, its mirrored door hanging open. I stepped closer, and my breath caught in my throat. The cabinet was packed with orange prescription bottles, stacked 3 deep on every shelf. I started reading labels. Valium prescribed to Jennifer Huang. Ambien prescribed to Catherine Walsh. Xanax prescribed to Patricia Morrison. My vision blurred. There were at least 30 bottles, maybe more, each with a different woman's name. Some I recognized from Elena's social circles. Others were strangers. But every single one was a powerful sedative or sleep aid. The prescription dates ranged from 6 months ago to as recent as last week. Patricia Morrison's bottle was dated Tuesday. The day she'd disappeared, the day she'd called police about Elena. The pieces were falling into place with horrible clarity. Elena was getting prescriptions in her friends' names somehow, probably through Dr. Blackwood or another corrupted medical professional in her network. She was drugging them, staging accidents, collecting insurance money, and judging by the number of bottles in this cabinet, she'd been doing it for far longer than anyone suspected. Sarah's voice cut through my shock, screaming now. "Mom, I can hear you breathing, but you're not talking. Whatever you found, it doesn't matter. Get out now." Tommy was looking up at me with wide eyes, finally sensing that something was very wrong. "Grandma, why do you look scared? Did I do something bad?" I grabbed one of the bottles, Patricia Morrison's Xanax, and shoved it in my pocket. Evidence. Then I scooped Tommy up, even though he was getting too big to carry, and I ran. Down the hallway, down the stairs, my feet barely touching the steps. Behind me, I heard a door open. Elena's voice, sharp and cold, nothing like the warm hostess tone she'd used all day. "Margaret, what are you doing upstairs? That area's off limits to guests." I didn't answer, didn't turn around, just kept running with Tommy in my arms. Through the foyer, past startled guests holding champagne glasses, out the front door. Sarah was yelling instructions through the phone. I'd somehow managed to keep gripped in my hand. "Get to your car, lock the doors, drive straight to the police station on Maple Street. Don't stop for anything." My car was parked at the end of the driveway, blocked in by at least 6 other vehicles. I'd have to move it, but first I had to get Tommy safely inside. I wrenched open the back door, preparing to buckle him into the seat. That's when I saw her. Patricia Morrison, slumped across my back seat like someone had placed her there deliberately, her chest rising and falling in shallow breaths. And pinned to her silk blouse with a safety pin was a small white note card in Elena's distinctive handwriting. "She knows too much." I set Tommy down and slammed the back door shut before he could see what was inside. My mind was screaming, but I forced my face into something resembling calm. "We need to go back inside for just a minute, sweetie. Grandma forgot to say goodbye properly." My voice sounded wrong, too high, too tight, but Tommy just nodded and took my hand. Sarah was still on the phone, and I whispered as quietly as I could. "Patricia Morrison is unconscious in my back seat. There's a note. Sarah, what do I do?" My daughter's response was immediate. "Act normal. Get back inside, make an excuse, and leave through the front with witnesses. If you run now, she'll know you found Patricia. You need to play this right, or you're both dead." We walked back through that front door, and I've never had to work harder to control my face. Elena was in the foyer talking to Judge Harrison, but her eyes locked onto me the second I entered. She knew something was wrong. I could see it in the way her smile didn't move, frozen in place like a mask. "Margaret, there you are. I thought I saw you heading outside." I forced a laugh that sounded more like a cough. "Just getting something from the car." "But Elena, I'm so sorry. Tommy's not feeling well. I think all the excitement and sugar has upset his stomach." I put my hand on Tommy's forehead like I was checking for fever. Tommy, bless him, looked confused but stayed quiet. Elena's eyes narrowed, her gaze moving from my face to Tommy and back again. "Not feeling well? But we haven't cut the cake yet." I had it specially made, Tommy's favorite, chocolate with vanilla frosting. She stepped closer, her perfume suffocating. "Surely he can stay for cake. It'll only take a few minutes." Her hand reached out toward Tommy, and I instinctively pulled him behind me. "I really think we should get him home. Maybe we can come back tomorrow and get a piece then?" Elena's smile grew sharper, more dangerous. "Tomorrow won't be the same, Margaret. Today is about family being together. All of us. Right here, right now." The way she emphasized those last words made my skin crawl. Judge Harrison had stopped talking and was watching our exchange with growing unease. Michael appeared from the living room, and for a moment, I thought maybe my brother would help us, would see something was wrong, and let us leave. "Maggie, what's going on? Is Tommy okay?" Before I could answer, Elena turned to him with that same frozen smile. "Margaret wants to leave early. I was just explaining that we haven't even served the birthday cake yet." Michael looked at Tommy, then at me, and I tried to communicate everything with my eyes. "Help us, please. Your wife is a killer." But he just put his hand on my shoulder and said, "Why don't I drive you both home? You've had a few glasses of champagne, better safe than sorry." Panic flared in my chest. Getting in a car with Michael meant getting separated from my own vehicle, from Patricia's unconscious body that was evidence Elena couldn't let anyone find. No, really, we're fine. I only had 2 glasses and that was hours ago. I was already backing toward the door, Tommy's hand clutched in mine. Elena moved to block our path, casual but deliberate. Margaret, you're being dramatic. If Tommy's truly ill, we have Dr. Blackwood here. He's a pediatrician, he can take a look. Of course, she wanted Dr. Blackwood to examine him, the same doctor who was probably helping her forge prescriptions and death certificates. That won't be necessary. My voice came out harder than I intended, and several nearby guests turned to look. Elena's mask slipped for just a second, and what I saw underneath made my blood freeze. Pure calculation, cold rage, the face of someone deciding whether to let a problem walk away or handle it permanently. Then just as quickly, the warm smile was back. Of course. Grandmother knows best. Let me at least walk you to your car. She linked her arm through mine with a grip like a vice, and we moved toward the door together. Sarah was still connected on my phone in my pocket, and I prayed she could hear what was happening. Other guests were starting to notice the tension, conversations dying as we passed. Dorothy Andrews was staring at us from the living room doorway, her face pale. Elena kept up a stream of pleasant chatter as we walked. Thank you so much for coming, Margaret. It meant the world to me, having you here today. We'll have to do this again soon. Very soon. The threat in those words was unmistakable. We reached the front door, and she finally released my arm, but she followed us outside onto the brick pathway. Drive safely now. And Margaret? I turned back, Tommy already pulling me toward the car. Elena was silhouetted in the doorway, backlit by the chandelier, looking less like a person and more like something wearing a person's skin. We should talk soon. About family matters, about trust, about what happens when people betray that trust. She wasn't even pretending anymore. She knew I'd found something, maybe not exactly what, but enough to be dangerous. I'll call you tomorrow, I managed to say, knowing tomorrow I'd be talking to police, not my murderous sister-in-law. See that you do, Elena replied, and stood there watching as I buckled Tommy into the front seat, my hands shaking so badly I could barely work the seatbelt. She was still watching as I started the engine, still standing in that doorway like a sentinel as I began backing down the driveway, having to maneuver around the other cars blocking me in. And she was still there, motionless and terrifying, as I finally got the car turned around and headed toward the street. I pulled onto the street and immediately steered the car to the curb 2 houses down, my hands shaking so violently I could barely hold the wheel. Tommy was asking why we were stopping, why I looked so scared, and I couldn't find words that would make sense to a 7-year-old. Sarah's voice came through the phone, frantic. Mom, talk to me. What's happening? I took a shaky breath. Patricia's breathing, but she won't wake up. There's a note pinned to her blouse. Tommy saw her. I glanced in the rearview mirror at Patricia's slack face, her head lolled against the window. Her chest was rising and falling in shallow, irregular breaths. How long had she been in my car? How had Elena gotten her there without anyone seeing? Tommy unbuckled his seatbelt and started to turn around. Grandma, is that the lady from the pictures in Aunt Elena's office? The one with the X on her face? My heart stopped. Tommy? When did you see pictures in Aunt Elena's office? He looked at me like I was being slow. When I was looking for the bathroom the first time, the door was open, and I saw all those pictures on the wall. Some of them had red X's. Is Miss Patricia okay? Why is she sleeping in our car? I couldn't process this. My 7-year-old grandson had seen Elena's wall of victims before I had, and I'd been too distracted to notice he'd wandered into that room. What else had he seen? What else did Elena know he'd seen? Sarah was yelling through the phone. Mom, you need to make a decision right now, hospital or police station. If you go to the hospital, Elena might have people there who can intercept you. Doctor, Blackwood works at Riverside General. But if Patricia dies while you're driving to the police station, they might think you had something to do with it. I looked at Patricia again. Her lips had a bluish tinge. Whatever Elena had given her, it was strong enough to keep her under for hours. How much longer did she have? I made the decision. Hospital. Riverside General is 10 minutes away. The police station is 20. I can't let her die, Sarah. My daughter made a frustrated sound. Okay, but Mom, the second you get there, you ask for security. You don't let anyone from Elena's circle near Patricia. You understand me? I pulled back onto the road, driving faster than I should have but unable to help it. Every red light felt like torture. Tommy had gone quiet in the front seat, his Superman shirt rumpled, his face pale. Grandma, are we in danger? Is Aunt Elena bad? How do you explain to a child that the aunt who'd given him birthday presents and taken him to the zoo was actually a serial killer? Tommy, I need you to be very brave right now. When we get to the hospital, you're going to stay right next to me. You don't talk to anyone I don't tell you to talk to. And if you see Aunt Elena or Uncle Michael, you tell me immediately. Can you do that? He nodded, his eyes too wide, too scared for a 7-year-old to look. Patricia made a sound in the back seat, a low moan that made me press harder on the accelerator. She's waking up, I told Sarah. Or trying to. Should I pull over? Should I try to help her? But Sarah said, no, keep driving. Getting to medical professionals was more important than anything I could do on the side of the road. In the rearview mirror, I watched Patricia's eyes flutter. Her mouth moved like she was trying to form words. Then her eyes opened fully, unfocused and glassy. She looked directly at me in the mirror and whispered something I could barely hear over the road noise. I rolled down the windows. What? Patricia, what did you say? Her voice came again, stronger this time, slurred but understandable. Insurance. She has insurance on all of us. Has to stop her. Then her eyes rolled back, and she went limp again. That's when I noticed the black SUV in my rearview mirror. It had pulled out from a side street 3 blocks back, and now it was maintaining the exact same distance behind me, matching my speed turn for turn. My stomach dropped. Sarah? There's a car following us. Black SUV, looks like a Escalade or Suburban, tinted windows. I took a random right turn onto Elm Street, even though it was the wrong direction for the hospital. The SUV turned with me. Mom, stay calm. I'm tracking your location on my phone. You're 7 minutes from Riverside General. Can you make it? I pressed the accelerator harder, blowing through a yellow light that was definitely more red. The SUV ran the light too, getting closer now. Tommy had twisted around in his seat and was staring at the vehicle behind us with frightened eyes. I took another turn, this time left onto Harrison Avenue, weaving around a slow-moving sedan. The SUV followed, its engine roaring as it accelerated. Whoever was driving didn't care about being subtle anymore. They're getting closer, Sarah. What do I do? My daughter's voice was tight with fear, but trying to stay calm for me. Keep driving. Don't stop for anything. The police are on their way. I'm on the phone with the detective right now. He knows you're being followed. I glanced at Patricia in the back seat, still unconscious, her body sliding with each turn I took. If I crashed, if this car forced me off the road, we were all dead. Tommy, Patricia, me. 3 more victims for Elena's collection. 3 more insurance policies she'd collect on while playing the grieving sister-in-law at our funerals. The SUV was close enough now that I could see there were 2 people inside, driver and passenger, but the tinted windows made it impossible to identify them. I ran another red light, this time earning angry honks from cross-traffic, and the SUV stayed right on my tail. Sarah. I tried calling Dad, my daughter said, her voice breaking. He's not answering. His phone goes straight to voicemail. Mom, I think he's with Elena. I think he knows what you found. The implication hung between us. My brother, the man I'd protected and loved my entire life, might be helping his serial killer wife chase us down. Or maybe he was already dead too, another liability Elena had decided to eliminate. The thought made me press harder on the gas pedal. We were flying down residential streets at 60 miles per hour, blowing through stop signs, and I was praying no children were playing in their yards. The hospital was 4 minutes away according to the GPS on my dashboard. 4 minutes that felt like 4 hours. Then I heard it, faint at first but getting louder. Sirens. Police sirens coming from somewhere ahead of us. Sarah must have heard them too through the phone because she let out a sob of relief. That's them, Mom. That's the state police. You're almost there. The SUV behind us suddenly slowed, dropping back as the sirens grew louder. Whoever was driving didn't want to be caught following us when the police arrived. Smart. Calculated. Exactly what I'd expect from Elena or whoever she'd sent to clean up her mess. 2 patrol cars appeared ahead, lights flashing, and one of them pulled a U-turn and fell in behind me, getting between my Honda and the black SUV. The other patrol car took up position beside me, the officer in the passenger seat gesturing for me to follow them. Relief flooded through me so intensely I almost couldn't see straight. We had made it. Tommy was crying now, quiet tears streaming down his face, and I reached over to squeeze his hand while trying to keep my eyes on the road. "It's okay, baby. The police are here now. We're safe." But even as I said it, I wasn't sure I believed it. Women like Elena didn't go down easy. Women who'd been killing for years, who had judges and doctors and half the town's elite under her control. They had contingency plans, and I had just declared war on her by surviving. The police escort got us to Riverside General in 3 minutes flat. I pulled up to the emergency entrance and barely had the car in park before officers were opening the back door and calling for paramedics. Patricia was loaded onto a gurney while I held Tommy against my side, both of us shaking. A female officer tried to separate us, said they needed to take my statement, but I refused to let go of my grandson until Sarah's voice came through my phone, still connected after all this time. "Mom, let them do their job. I called Tommy's parents. They're catching the next flight out of Boston. The detective needs to hear everything you saw." So, I let a younger officer take Tommy to a private waiting room, while an older detective with kind eyes and a notebook led me to a small consultation room. I started talking and couldn't stop. The wall of photos in Elena's office, the insurance files with forged signatures, the medicine cabinet full of prescriptions in other women's names, the note pinned to Patricia's blouse, the black SUV that had chased us through residential streets. Detective Morris wrote everything down, his expression getting grimmer with each detail. "Mrs. Chen, how long have you known your sister-in-law?" 15 years, I told him. 15 years of family dinners and birthday parties and holidays, and I'd never suspected she was anything other than the perfect woman who'd married my brother. "She's good at this," Detective Morris said quietly. "Women like Elena, they're master manipulators. They build trust over years, then exploit it. You're not the first person she's fooled, and you won't be the last." That's when a nurse burst into the room. "Detective, the woman from the car is awake. She's asking for Margaret Chen." We rushed down the hallway to Patricia's room, where she was propped up in bed, an IV in her arm, her face pale but her eyes alert. She grabbed my hand the moment I got close enough, her grip surprisingly strong. "Margaret, thank God. I thought I was dead. I thought she'd killed me." Her voice was hoarse, raspy from whatever drug had kept her unconscious. "Patricia, what happened? Where have you been since Tuesday?" She closed her eyes and took a shaky breath. "Elena invited me for coffee Tuesday morning. Just us girls," she said. She wanted to discuss some charity event. "I went to her house and she made those fancy lattes she's always bragging about." Patricia's hand tightened on mine. I only had a few sips before I started feeling wrong. Dizzy, confused. Elena was talking, but her voice sounded far away. Then she said something that made my blood run cold, even through the fog of whatever she'd given me. She said, "You shouldn't have gone through my desk, Patricia. You shouldn't have found those policies." I tried to stand up, tried to run, but my legs wouldn't work. The last thing I remember, before everything went black, was Elena's face looking down at me. No emotion at all, like I was already dead. Detective Morris moved closer to the bed. "What policies, Mrs. Morrison? What did you find?" Patricia looked at him, then back at me. "Life insurance policies? Elena had taken one out on me for $2 million. I only found out because my financial advisor called asking if I'd authorized a medical exam for a policy application." I hadn't. She took a sip of water a nurse handed her, wincing as she swallowed. "I went to Elena's house under the pretense of borrowing a book. While she was in the kitchen, I looked through her office. There were files, so many files. Policies on at least a dozen women, all of us in Elena's social circle. Most were for amounts between $1 and $5 million. All had our signatures, but I know I never signed anything. The signatures were forged." Patricia's voice dropped to a whisper. "And there were 3 files marked closed. Rebecca Winters, who died in a car accident 2 years ago. Linda Patterson, who fell down her stairs 18 months ago. Cheryl Adamson, who had a fatal allergic reaction at one of Elena's dinner parties last year. All accidents, all within months of Elena taking out policies on them. Detective Morris had gone very still. "Did you report this to the police?" Patricia nodded. "I called the station Tuesday afternoon before I went to Elena's for coffee. I left a message for Detective Harrison about insurance fraud. I told them I had evidence. I was supposed to bring the files in that afternoon, but Elena called and invited me over, said it was urgent, couldn't wait. I thought she wanted to talk about the upcoming fundraiser. I was so stupid. She knew I'd found the files. She must have cameras in that office. She knew exactly what I'd discovered." Her eyes filled with tears. "Where have I been, Margaret? What day is it?" When the nurse told her it was Saturday, 4 days after she'd gone to Elena's house, Patricia went white. 4 days. She kept me drugged for 4 days. Where was I? That was the question that made my stomach turn. If Patricia had been unconscious for 4 days, where had Elena been keeping her? And how had she gotten Patricia's body into my car without anyone at the party noticing? Detective Morris was already on his radio, calling for backup units to return to Elena's estate to secure the property before evidence could be destroyed. But I had a sinking feeling we were too late. Elena had been planning this for years, maybe decades. She would have contingency plans for every scenario, including the one where Patricia was found alive and talking. The question now was what else she had planned, and whether my brother Michael was a victim or an accomplice. The answer to that question came faster than any of us expected, and it wasn't what I wanted to hear. 2 more detectives arrived within minutes, and one of them I recognized. Detective Sarah Hoffman from the state police, the same woman who'd spoken at a community safety event I'd attended last year. She took one look at Patricia in the hospital bed and let out a long breath. "Mrs. Morrison, we've been looking for you for 3 days. Your daughter filed a missing persons report Wednesday morning." Patricia started crying, asking if someone could call Hannah, tell her she was alive. But Detective Hoffman had more pressing questions. She turned to me and said something that made the room tilt. "Mrs. Chen, how much do you know about your sister-in-law's background, her life before she married your brother?" I admitted I knew almost nothing. Elena had always been vague about her past, said her family was old money from the Northeast, that she'd lost her parents young and preferred not to dwell on painful memories. We'd all accepted it because Elena was so warm, so generous, so present in our lives that her past seemed irrelevant. Detective Hoffman pulled out a tablet and turned it toward me. On the screen was a photo of Elena, maybe 10 years younger, standing next to a man I'd never seen before. "This is Jennifer Caldwell and her third husband, Robert Caldwell. He died 11 years ago in a boating accident off the coast of Maine. She collected $1.2 million in life insurance." My mouth went dry. "Third husband?" Hoffman swiped to another photo. Elena, younger still, with a different man. "Husband number 2, David Erickson. Died in a house fire in Oregon 13 years ago. Elena, who was going by Jennifer Erickson at the time, collected $800,000. Another swipe. Husband number 1, Thomas Brennan. Fell from a hiking trail in Colorado 15 years ago. Jennifer Brennan collected $500,000. I stared at the photos, at the woman I'd known as Elena wearing different clothes, different hairstyles, different names, but always the same calculating smile. "We've been investigating her for 8 months, Hoffman continued. "Ever since the FBI flagged a pattern of insurance claims following suspicious deaths across multiple states." The room was spinning. "Why didn't you arrest her? Why was she free to keep killing people?" Hoffman's expression was grim. "Because she's smart. Really smart. Every death was ruled accidental. Every signature on every policy was authenticated by so-called experts. Every witness statement supported her version of events. We knew what she was doing, but we couldn't prove it. We needed someone on the inside, someone who could get us hard evidence." She looked at Patricia. "When Mrs. Morrison called our tip line Tuesday afternoon about the insurance files, we were ecstatic. Finally, someone who'd seen the proof firsthand. We told her to sit tight, that we'd send an officer to retrieve the evidence that evening. But by the time our officer arrived at her house, she was gone." Patricia spoke up from the bed, her voice stronger now. Elena called me 20 minutes after I hung up with the police. She'd never called me in the middle of the day before, always texted. She said she needed to see me urgently, that it was about Michael, that he was in trouble and she needed my advice. I went because I was worried. I thought my friend's husband needed help. Her voice broke on the word friend. She poisoned me the moment I walked through her door. She knew I'd called the police. How did she know? Detective Morris exchanged a look with Hoffman. We think she has someone inside law enforcement feeding her information. Someone who's been helping her stage these accidents and manipulate investigations for years. We're running internal checks now on everyone who had access to that tip line call. Hoffman turned back to me. Mrs. Chen, we need everything you saw in that office. Every photo, every file, every detail you can remember. Your testimony combined with Mrs. Morrison's might finally be enough to get a warrant we can actually execute. I started talking again, describing the wall of photos with notes about blackmail material, the file cabinet full of forged insurance policies, my own file with Tommy's face circled in red. With each detail I provided, the detectives looked more disturbed. She was planning to kill you too, Hoffman said quietly, probably within the next few months. These operations, she typically runs them in clusters, gets multiple policies approved, then stages accidents over a 6 to 12-month period so they don't all trace back to her immediately. That's when Detective Morris's radio crackled. A unit at Elena's estate reporting in. The property is empty. Repeat, property is empty. The birthday party dispersed approximately 40 minutes ago. No sign of Elena or Michael Chen. We've got the house secured and crime scene techs are en route, but it looks like someone cleaned out the office. File cabinet's empty. Photos are gone from the wall. Only thing left is furniture. My heart sank. Of course she'd cleaned it out. The moment she'd realized I'd been upstairs, that I'd run from the party with Tommy, she would have known I'd found her evidence. She'd probably ushered all the guests out with some excuse, then systematically destroyed everything that could incriminate her. Years of planning, decades of murder, all disappearing before the police could secure it. But then, Patricia spoke again, her voice cutting through my despair. She doesn't know about the thumb drive. Everyone turned to look at her. When I found the files in her office Tuesday morning, I photographed everything with my phone. Every policy, every note, every piece of evidence. Then I uploaded it all to a thumb drive and put it in my safety deposit box at First National Bank. She looked at Detective Hoffman. I was going to give it to you Tuesday night when you came for the evidence. It's still there. Everything she tried to hide, I have copies. The relief that washed over the detectives' faces was visible. Physical evidence, documented proof, all safely locked away where Elena couldn't reach it. Maybe we had her after all. Michael walked into Patricia's hospital room 30 minutes later, and the moment I saw his face, I knew. He looked like a man who'd already died inside, hollow and gray. Maggie, thank God you're okay. I just heard what happened. The police showing up at the house, Elena saying you'd stolen something and fled with Tommy. He moved toward me, with his arms out like he was going to hug me, but two officers stepped between us. Detective Hoffman's voice was ice cold. Mr. Chen, we need you to come with us for questioning. Michael's face went pale. Questioning? About what? I'm the victim here. My wife has been lying to me for 15 years. But Hoffman was already pulling up security footage on her tablet. Is this you at First National Bank on October 3rd, withdrawing $45,000 in cash? The video showed Michael clearly, looking nervous, glancing around before stuffing envelopes into his briefcase. And here on September 12th, 30,000, August 20th, 60,000. Over the past 6 months, you've withdrawn nearly $300,000 in cash from your business accounts. Michael's jaw clenched. That's my money. I can withdraw whatever I want. Hoffman swiped to another video. This is you meeting with a man named Vincent Torres, known associate of organized crime, in a parking garage. Mr. Torres specializes in forging documents and creating false identities. Want to explain that? Michael looked at me then, and I saw something I'd never seen in my little brother's eyes before. Guilt, shame, fear. She was blackmailing me, he whispered. For how long, Michael? How long have you known what Elena was doing? He slumped into a chair, his head in his hands. 3 years. I found out 3 years ago when I accidentally opened a piece of mail addressed to her. An insurance policy on my business partner, David Sterling. $2 million, with Elena as beneficiary. David died 2 months later in what police called a random mugging gone wrong. My stomach turned. David Sterling, Rebecca's husband, the man Elena had claimed was like family. She'd killed him and collected $2 million while comforting his widow. I confronted her. Michael continued, his voice dead. And she showed me evidence of tax fraud I'd committed 8 years ago when my business was failing. Documents I'd forged, bribes I'd paid to get zoning permits, shell companies I'd used to hide income from the IRS. She had it all. She'd been collecting evidence against me from the moment we got married, like she knew she'd need leverage someday. He looked up at Detective Hoffman. She said if I ever reported her, if I ever tried to leave her, she'd destroy me. I'd lose my business, go to prison, lose everything. So I stayed quiet and hated myself every single day. Detective Hoffman's radio crackled again. We have her. Subject apprehended attempting to cross state line into New York. Vehicle stopped at checkpoint. Elena Chen is in custody. The relief in that room was overwhelming, but it was short-lived. Because within an hour, news vans were parked outside Riverside General, and my phone, which I'd finally retrieved from evidence, was exploding with messages. The story was already breaking. Local news anchor Maria Rodriguez stood in front of Elena's mansion on the evening broadcast, her face serious. What began as an elegant birthday party in this exclusive Riverside Heights neighborhood ended with state police arresting prominent socialite Elena Chen on multiple charges, including attempted murder, insurance fraud, and suspicion of involvement in at least 6 deaths spanning 15 years. The footage showed Elena being led out of a police vehicle in handcuffs, her cream-colored dress now wrinkled, her perfect hair disheveled. But what struck me most was her face. No tears, no emotion, just cold calculation, even in custody. The news report continued with interviews from party guests, all of them shocked, horrified, claiming they'd had no idea. Judge Harrison's wife clutched pearls and said Elena had seemed like such a lovely woman. Dr. Blackwood refused to comment, his lawyer already beside him. But it was what the police found during their search of the estate that made national headlines by morning. Behind a false wall in Elena's office, investigators discovered a room that explained everything. The hidden room was roughly 10 by 12 feet, and every wall was covered with monitors and recording equipment. The news showed brief footage of investigators cataloging evidence, their faces grim. Elena had been recording everyone. Tiny cameras hidden throughout her house had captured 15 years of dinner parties, charity meetings, private conversations. The blackmail material was staggering, Judge Harrison discussing case decisions before trials began. Dr. Blackwood admitting to insurance fraud, business deals made on insider information, affairs conducted in guest bedrooms, illegal campaign contributions discussed over wine. Elena had turned her home into a surveillance operation, gathering ammunition she could use against anyone who threatened her or refused to cooperate with her schemes. That evening, Sarah arrived from Seattle, having caught the first flight out after hearing about Elena's arrest. She walked into my hospital room where I was being kept for observation, took one look at me, and burst into tears. We held each other for a long time, neither of us able to speak. Finally, she pulled back and said what I'd been waiting to hear. She threatened me, Mom. 3 months ago, I'd started noticing things didn't add up with Elena. The way she always had money for everything, but claimed it was family inheritance. The way people seemed afraid of her at parties. So I hired a private investigator to look into her background. Sarah sat on the edge of my hospital bed, exhausted and relieved in equal measure. The investigator found her previous marriages, the dead husbands, the pattern of insurance claims. He compiled a preliminary report, and I was going to bring it to the FBI. But Elena found out somehow. She came to my apartment one night, let herself in with a key I didn't know she had, and sat in my living room waiting for me. She had photos of Tommy leaving school, detailed notes about his daily routine, and she told me exactly how she'd make it look like an accident if I didn't disappear. Sarah's hands were shaking as she spoke. She said Seattle would be perfect, that the job offer was real, that she'd arranged it through connections. All I had to do was move, stay quiet, and never come back to Connecticut. So I went because I couldn't risk Tommy's life. But I kept investigating from Seattle, kept gathering evidence, kept waiting for the right moment to expose her. 3 months after that October afternoon, I sat in a courtroom watching my former sister-in-law, now identified officially as Jennifer Caldwell, enter a plea of not guilty to 17 counts, including 6 counts of first-degree murder, 11 counts of attempted murder, 43 counts of insurance fraud, and numerous counts of identity theft and blackmail. She wore an orange jumpsuit instead of designer dresses, but her posture was still perfect, her face still showing no emotion. The prosecutor told the judge they had overwhelming evidence, including Patricia's thumb drive, the surveillance equipment from the hidden room, testimony from dozens of victims, and forensic evidence linking Elena to the deaths of at least 6 people over 15 years. The judge denied bail, citing her as an extreme flight risk with resources and connections across multiple states. Michael was there too, sitting on the opposite side of the courtroom from me. We hadn't spoken since the hospital, though his lawyer had reached out multiple times asking if I'd provide a character witness statement. I'd refused. My brother had known for 3 years that Elena was murdering people, and he'd stayed silent to protect his business and his freedom. He'd accepted a plea deal in exchange for his testimony against Elena, admitting to tax fraud and obstruction of justice. He'd serve 18 months in a minimum security facility and lose his real estate license permanently. When the judge read his sentence 2 weeks later, he'd turned to look at me in the gallery, tears streaming down his face, mouthing the words, "I'm sorry." I'd walked out without responding. But Michael had started therapy, intensive sessions 3 times a week to deal with what his lawyer called complex trauma and coercive control. His therapist sent me a letter explaining that Michael had been a victim too, that Elena's psychological manipulation over 15 years had been systematic and devastating. I read the letter twice and then put it in a drawer. Maybe someday I'd be ready to forgive him. Maybe someday I'd understand how fear could make someone complicit in murder. But that day hadn't come yet. Sarah was angrier than me, refusing to even acknowledge her uncle's existence. "He chose his money over people's lives, Mom. There's no excuse for that." And she was right. But he was still my brother, still the little boy I'd protected on playgrounds and helped with homework, and grief for who he'd been was complicated. Patricia Morrison had become something of a local hero. After spending a week in the hospital, recovering from the barbiturates Elena had pumped into her system, she'd given a press conference detailing everything she'd discovered and survived. Within a month, she'd started a nonprofit organization called Insurance Fraud Awareness Network, dedicated to helping people recognize the warning signs of insurance-based murder schemes. She'd appeared on 3 national news programs and was working with state legislators to tighten regulations around life insurance policy applications. When we had lunch together in late December, she told me she'd found purpose in her near-death experience. "Elena took 4 days of my life. I'm not letting her take anything more. Instead, I'm using what happened to save other people." Her strength amazed me. Tommy was doing better than I'd expected. His parents had brought him to a child psychologist specializing in trauma, and after 8 weeks of play therapy and counseling, his nightmares had mostly stopped. He still didn't like going to big parties, and he asked a lot of questions about how you could tell if someone was lying, but his therapist said that was normal, even healthy. He'd learned that the world wasn't always safe, that people weren't always what they seemed, and he was processing that knowledge in age-appropriate ways. The Superman shirt he'd worn that day stayed crumpled in the back of his closet. He'd chosen a new favorite, this one with Spider-Man, and when I asked him why he'd switched heroes, he said, "Spider-Man knows everyone wears masks, Grandma. He's smarter about it." And Sarah moved back to Connecticut in November, transferring her job to a remote position so she could stay close to family. She'd found an apartment 10 minutes from my house, and we had dinner together 3 times a week, rebuilding the relationship that Elena's threats had fractured. Sometimes we talked about what happened, processing the trauma together. Other times, we deliberately avoided the topic, focusing instead on normal things like her dating life and my garden plans for spring. She'd been the one to save us all, her persistence in investigating Elena despite the threats, her quick thinking during the phone call that got us out of that party alive. "I almost didn't call you that day," she admitted one evening over wine. I thought maybe I was being paranoid. Maybe the PI was wrong. But something told me you were in immediate danger. Mother's intuition in reverse, I guess. The hardest part was accepting how thoroughly I'd been fooled. For 15 years, I'd welcomed Elena into my family, trusted her with my grandson, admired her grace and generosity. I'd thought she was the perfect sister-in-law, the kind of woman who elevated everyone around her. Instead, she'd been a predator, studying her prey, gathering information she could weaponize, building a network of blackmail and fear while smiling at birthday parties and charity luncheons. Every kind gesture had been calculated. Every gift had come with invisible strings. Every confidence shared had been ammunition stored for future use. The woman I'd known had never existed at all. She'd been a character Elena played, a carefully constructed illusion designed to disarm and manipulate, and I'd fallen for it completely. The detail that still keeps me awake at night came out during the prosecution's evidence presentation in January. Among the items seized from Elena's hidden room was a leather-bound journal, the expensive kind with gold-edged pages that she probably bought at some boutique stationery store. In it, she documented every operation going back 20 years, every target, every timeline, every method. The prosecutors used it to link her definitively to murders across 6 states, but it was the final entry, dated October 13th, the day before her birthday party, that made my blood run cold when Detective Hoffman read it to me over the phone. Margaret Chen, elimination scheduled October 15th. Policy already in place, $2 million. Method: carbon monoxide poisoning during overnight visit with grandson will appear as faulty furnace. Backup method if primary fails. Staged car accident on Route 7, brake line already accessed and weakened during oil change September 28th. She'd already taken out the life insurance policy on me, already forged my signature, already planned exactly how and when I would die. The birthday party on October 14th wasn't just a celebration, it was reconnaissance. A final opportunity to observe me, to confirm I suspected nothing, to ensure her plan would work. And Tommy, my precious grandson, was supposed to be collateral damage, another tragic victim of a faulty furnace that investigators would rule accidental. Elena had even scheduled the oil change for my car, had someone at the service center she controlled weaken my brake lines as backup. If the carbon monoxide didn't kill me, the drive home from some future family dinner would. Every base covered, every contingency planned, all while smiling and serving birthday cake. Sarah's investigation had saved my life in ways I hadn't fully understood until I heard that journal entry. If she hadn't hired that private investigator, hadn't kept pushing despite Elena's threats, hadn't called me at exactly the right moment that October afternoon, I'd be dead. Tommy would likely be dead. And Elena would have collected $2 million while playing the grieving sister-in-law at my funeral, probably giving a beautiful eulogy about how much she'd loved me. The thought makes me physically ill even now, months later. But it also fills me with gratitude for a daughter who trusted her instincts even when it meant putting herself at risk, who loved me enough to become a target herself in order to protect me. Now before we close, I need to tell you something important. If you've watched this far, if this story resonated with you or made you think about the people in your own life, please subscribe to this channel, because what happened to me could happen to anyone. Elena wasn't some obvious villain. She was charming, generous, seemingly perfect. And there are more people like her out there, predators hiding behind smiles and social connections. By subscribing, you're not just supporting this channel, you're staying informed about real dangers that exist in our communities. You're choosing to be aware rather than complacent. And if you don't subscribe, I genuinely want to know why. Leave a comment explaining what's holding you back, because this information could save your life or the life of someone you love. The trial lasted 6 weeks. The prosecution presented testimony from 43 witnesses, including myself, Patricia, Sarah, Michael, and 7 other women who'd narrowly escaped becoming Elena's victims. They showed the jury the surveillance equipment, the forged insurance documents, the journal with its meticulous death planning. The defense tried to argue that Elena suffered from dissociative identity disorder, that Jennifer Caldwell and Elena Chen were different personalities, that she wasn't responsible for actions she couldn't remember. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. guilty on all counts. The judge sentenced her to 6 consecutive life terms without possibility of parole, plus 340 years for the fraud and attempted murder charges. She'll die in prison, and that should bring me comfort. But mostly I just feel empty. Because here's what I've learned from all of this. Trust your instincts. When someone seems too perfect, when their life appears too carefully curated, when they're always in control and always have the answers, ask yourself why. Perfect doesn't exist. Perfect is a performance, and performances have purposes. Elena spent 15 years performing perfection, and underneath it was nothing but calculation and death. The unease I felt the morning of her party, the whisper of intuition I dismissed, that was my subconscious recognizing something my conscious mind refused to see. I'll never ignore that whisper again. I'll never assume that charm and generosity equal safety. And I'll never stop being grateful that my daughter trusted her instincts when I failed to trust mine. Elena sits in a maximum security facility in upstate New York now, still maintaining her innocence despite overwhelming evidence. But 7 more victims have come forward since her arrest, women who survived her earlier schemes in other states under other names, women who'd been too afraid to report her until they saw she was finally behind bars. The FBI believes the total death toll could be as high as 12 people over 20 years, with dozens more who were targeted but escaped through luck or circumstance. She's currently being investigated for 3 additional murders in Oregon and Maine. The woman who played my perfect sister-in-law for 15 years was one of the most prolific serial killers in recent American history. And I invited her into my home, trusted her with my family, and never suspected a thing until it was almost too late.